This is a tutorial explaining how to play Battlespace Next, Multi-Domain Operations, a card-based strategy game simulating modern peer-to-peer warfare. This video is brought to you in partnership with the Air Force Cyberspace Technical Center of Excellence and the Center for Cyberspace Research at the Air Force Institute of Technology. I am Nathan Flack, a student at AFIT, and I will explain the game rules and concepts of Battlespace Next, a game based on the multi-domain command and control trading card game created by Lieutenant Colonel Alan Lynn. The views expressed in this video are that of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Let's start with a basic description of the game. It is a 2 or 4 player card game that can be played 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2. If there are 4 players, you will need to split into 2 teams. Each team of 2 will share a deck of 54 cards. The teams must work together to defeat the opposing team. This card game is a strategy game designed to initiate conversation on multi-domain operations and peer-to-peer warfare. The game is composed of military capabilities in air, ground, space, cyber, maritime, and human domains. The player's task is to use the deck of 54 cards to defeat the opponent by destroying their Multi-Domain Operations Center, or MDOC. Next, we will see how to set up the game. This is a high-level overview of the game board and setup. You will play the game by sitting across the table from your opponent. Your playing area is highlighted in blue and your opponent's area is mirrored above in red. Let's focus on your side of the playing area. Your side is marked in blue. Let's walk through the different parts of the playing area. Here are the player's supply and discard piles. The supply pile starts with 42 cards. The discard pile is for discarded cards and will be empty at the beginning of the game. The 4 cards shown here will be placed in the middle row of the playing area. These cards are pre-positioned, meaning that each player will start with them in the beginning of the game. Each player starts with a multi-domain operations center, a combined space operations center, a cyber operations center, and an IADS command center. IADS stands for Integrated Air Defense System. These cards are placed in level 2 of the game board. More explanation on the levels 1 through 3 will be provided later in this tutorial. Each player will begin the game with 6 cards in their hand that they choose out of the 48 available cards. These cards should be chosen carefully and support a specific game strategy. Players should take time to read all the cards ahead of time and be familiar with their capabilities. This will help to speed up gameplay. After the starting hand is selected, the 42 remaining cards will be shuffled and placed in the supply pile. The player who goes first will start their first turn with 4 resource chips, and the player who goes second will gain an extra resource chip and start with 5 at the beginning. This helps to balance the game between the player who goes first and the player who goes second. Resource chips are used to pay for cards when deploying them to the playing area. The Spectrum of Conflict card is placed between the players. Only one of these cards is required per game. Place 1 of the black chips on the yellow 1 to mark the beginning level of conflict. This card simulates the rise in conflict from competition into open conflict. This controls the types of attack that can be used. No attack actions may be used in the starting round, and no kinetic attacks may be used until the conflict level surpasses the threshold marked on the card. During the competition phase, cyber and information operation attacks may be used. The conflict level rises at the end of each round. After each player takes 1 turn, one of the players rolls a die to determine the rise in conflict. If a player rolls a 4, the conflict level will move up to 3. Additional details are provided on the card. The level can only go up, so once the marker passes the threshold, all restrictions are removed and the players can stop rolling after each round. The GPS-2 constellation is a capability that is shared by both players. This simulates the worldwide and public characteristics of the positioning, navigation, and timing assets that the military uses today. If this card is destroyed or degraded by jamming during the game, it will affect both players. Each player will need approximately 25 black damage chips and 1 6-sided die to play the game. Turn timers will also be needed. You can use a smartphone app to do this, or a sand timer. Each player gets 60 seconds for each of their turns. This screen shows that your opponent's area mirrors your setup. Notice levels 1, 2, and 3 are in reverse order. Now let's explore the cards that you will use during the game. The cards are separated into 6 domains designated by the background color or pattern on the cards. The type of cards is also written in the middle of the card next to the card's function. The written instructions on the card are very important to the game and determining specific outcomes in attack and defense scenarios. If there is a disagreement, seek a way ahead that is amiable to both players. Also, the outcome that most closely simulates real-world actions and outcomes should take precedence. Let's take a look at one of the cards in depth. This is the F-35A Joint Strike Fighter. There are several important features to note. Starting at the top, you will see the card's cost. The cost refers to the number of resources required to deploy this card. Next is the role. The card's role is listed in the middle and defines the domain that this card plays in the game. The attack options define the other assets this card can attack, and the defense options define which assets this card can defend against. Next is the requirements. These are the other cards or capabilities that must be employed and revealed in order to use this card. Cards may be deployed without the listed requirement, but must be present when used. As you can see on the F-35, the requirement for a refueler or forward operating base is only needed when attacking. This card can always defend even if this requirement is not met. Traits provide game-modifying effects. For the F-35, when it is deployed, it provides all other assets with attack or defense options with a +1 bonus. This means that when attacking and defending, all other cards with attack points next to the target icon will gain 1 additional point. This does not increase other units' health points. The smaller text defines the real-world concept or weapon system that inspired the card. At the bottom by the red target icon, you can see the attack value. That shows the amount of damage inflicted on another card during an attack or defense. You may also see a hyphen in place of a number. The ransomware card is an example of this. The hyphen means that this card cannot attack another card's health points. Next to it is the card's health points. This describes the maximum damage a card can receive before it must be discarded. Again, the ransomware card shows the hyphen in place of a number. This means that this card cannot be targeted by cards with attack points. There are 2 states a card may be in during the game. The state is determined by the actions taken by each player. All deployed cards can either be revealed or unrevealed. First, if a card is unrevealed, it is ready to be used for attack or defense, but the enemy does not know what the card is. Unrevealed cards cannot fulfill other cards' requirements, and its traits do not apply to the game. Also, unrevealed cards cannot be targeted during an opponent's attack. A card moves to the revealed state when the player flips it over to use its traits or attack and defense options. Players may also be forced to reveal cards based on enemy ISR assets. If all requirements are met, the revealed card's traits apply to the game. Let's look again at the game layout and prepare for the simulation used in this tutorial. Here is a view of one side of the playing area. The supply and discard piles and resources are shown on the right. At the bottom is the cards in your hand. Each player will start each turn with 6 cards in their hand. Each player starts with 4 resources, except for the player who goes second will start with 5. The 3 levels of playing cards are shown on the left. Level 1 is for cards that are deployed on the current turn. Level 2 is for all cards that only have attack actions or do not have any attack or defense options. These are the assets that you will want to protect from attack. Level 3 is for all assets that have defensive options. These cards can be used to intercept enemy attacks against all cards in Level 2. as well as some cards in level 3 that do not have defensive options that apply to the attacker. More on interceptors will be covered later in the tutorial. Here's an overview of the actions players will take during each turn. It may be helpful to have these steps available during gameplay. Look at the last page of the game instructions for a summary of these actions. First, the player should reset the turn timer. Each player has 60 seconds to complete their turn. Second, the player draws additional cards until they have 6 in their hand, and then take an additional 4 resource chips. Third, they deploy all the cards that they choose by placing them in level 1 and paying the associated cost. Fourth, he or she uses cards in levels 2 and 3 to attack enemy cards. Remember, cards can only attack once per turn. The fifth action is to assign the cards that were deployed on the turn to the correct level, either 2 or 3, depending on the content of the card. Sixth, you will have the option to discard cards in your hand. This will cause you to move through your supply pile more quickly, but may also allow you access to the cards that are currently buried in your supply. We will now walk through each of these steps in the simulation. The first step of the turn is to reset the turn timer. If the turn timer expires during a player's turn, the opponent can immediately reset the turn timer and begin their turn. The other player cannot take any further actions. Each player has 60 seconds per turn. Second is resource acquisition. On this step, you will draw cards from your supply pile until you have 6 cards in your hand. You will also draw 4 additional resources. If you have resources left over from a previous turn, you may keep them. Therefore, players may have more than 4 resources during the game. The third step is to deploy cards. The player will take them from their hand and place them on the table in level 1 and immediately pay the associated cost. They may choose to reveal the card, which means turning it face up if they desire. If the player was to deploy the social media card, they would place the card down in front of them and then pay the number of resources shown on the card's cost. The cost of this card is 1, so they would place the card down and remove 1 resource. This card cannot be used on the current turn, but will be available to attack the opponent on the next turn. Cards may be deployed even if the requirements are not met. We will also deploy a SAM site, which requires 2 additional resources. The fourth step is to attack. In this step, the player can use any cards in levels 2 and 3 to attack enemy cards. The cards must be revealed in order to attack, and you can only target revealed enemy cards. Specific attack procedures and order of battle are covered later in this tutorial. Cards must have an attack option to be used. All requirements must be met to attack, and cards may only attack once per turn. The next step is to assign forces. In this step, you will move all the cards that you deployed at the beginning of this turn to levels 2 and 3, depending on the card's capabilities. Let's say that you had deployed the B-22 and F-22 cards in addition to the 2 others. The social media and B2 cards do not have defensive options, so you would place them in level 2 with your pre-positioned cards. Because the SAM and F-22 do have defensive options, they must be placed in level 3, furthest from the player. Cards may be assigned without revealing them to the enemy. Also, these cards are now available for defense on your opponent's next turn, and available for attack on your next turn. The sixth step is to discard. This is an optional step. The player may choose to discard some or all of the remaining cards in their hand. This will enable the player to pick up more cards at the beginning of the next turn. This player chooses to discard 1 card. At the beginning of the player's next turn, they would draw an additional 5 cards to give them a total of 6. They would also take another 4 resources from the bank. During the attack step, they would be able to use the highlighted cards to attack the opponent. Now we'll look more closely at attack and defense. In order to attack another card, the attack options on your card must match the card's type. Let's use an example of an F-35 and an Abrams tank. The F-35 has attack, strike, ground, so it can attack any ground card. The Abrams card type is listed in the middle. If the tank was attacking, it would not be able to do any damage to the F-35, but would need to target another ground asset. This is controlled by the attack options on the Abrams that do not match the F-35's type. Defensive actions work in the same way, but use the defensive options instead. Cards use their defensive options when attacked, but only do damage if its defensive options match the type of the attacking card. Some cards can intercept enemy attacks. If a card in level 2 is attacked, any card with defensive options, level 3, may be used to intercept. Additionally, if a card in level 3 is attacked, and its defensive options do not match the card's type, another level 3 card may be used to intercept. The defender may reveal cards to use as interceptors during the opponent's attack. If the F-35 attacked the Abrams tank and was not intercepted by another defensive asset, then the F-35's attack point would remove 1 health point from the Abrams. 1 black damaged chip would be placed on the tank, and the F-35 would receive no damage. There may be times when cards' attack points are greater than another card's health points. This is called excess damage. In this game, excess damage is ignored and does not carry over to other assets. Every attack follows 3 basic steps. In some cases, step 2 will be skipped. First, the current player declares an attacking card and the associated target. Each attack action can only have 1 attacker and 1 target. Second, if the attack is against level 2, or if the defensive options of the target do not match, then the defender can choose a card to intercept that has applicable defensive options. Third is resolution. If no intercept is used, then the resolution happens between the original target and the original attacker. An intercept may be used when the opponent attacks a card in level 2 or in level 3 and the defensive options of the target card do not match the attacking card's type. If the attacking card is not destroyed by the interceptor, it will also apply damage to the original target. Defensive cards may be revealed to be used as an intercept after the attack is declared. Cruise missiles are a unique element of the game. Cruise missiles are a long-range fires capability that must be purchased for each use. The cruise missile card only needs to be deployed once and then can be used multiple times with different launchers. The cruise missile card will not be discarded even on a successful or unsuccessful attack, or if the associated launcher is destroyed. It must be paired with a cruise missile launcher to be used. You can move the cruise missile card to another launcher for free. 1 resource chip must be spent each time you want to use the card. The card should be turned horizontally to show both players that it has been used. Here is a cruise missile example. Let's say a player had a destroyer and a Griffin with carrier and forward operating base for support. If they deploy the cruise missile card, they would immediately add it to one of the launchers. If they choose the Griffin, they would add it like this. During their turn, because they have an active fob, they can attack using the cruise missile. As long as there is no GPS jamming, a roll is not required. The defender has the opportunity to defend against the cruise missile with 1 card, either revealed or unrevealed. If the roll is unsuccessful, then you will do 3 damage to your target. You may not change the target once it is declared. Disabled SAM sites and Patriots cannot defend against a cruise missile. Once the attack is executed, the cruise missile will be turned horizontally. Now you have the option to move it to the cruiser for free. If we want to use the cruiser to launch another missile, we need to spend 1 resource to activate the card. This screen shows the top 2 levels of cards for each player to provide an example of attack and defense. The cards are turned sideways for readability. It is currently Blue's turn. They can use their F-22 stealth fighter to attack the opponent's F-15. Red cannot use another asset to intercept the attack because the F-15 has Defense Air as an option. Since Red has no card that can detect stealth, the F-15 cannot defend itself and will receive 2 damage. The F-15 would be discarded and the F-22 would receive no damage. Red can also use the social media card. This card requires a roll. If the player rolls a 3, then the opponent loses 1 resource on their next 2 turns. This can be marked using the black damage chips. Place 2 chips on the card. Each time the opponent draws 3 resources instead of 4, remove 1 black chip. When the final chip is removed, discard the card. On Red's turn, when they reach the attack phase, they have attack options they can use. Let's say they turn over the Growler and use it to disable the opponent's SAM site. They will flip the card over and declare they're using the radar jamming attack against the SAM. They will then roll the die. If the player rolls a 2 or higher, the SAM site will be disabled for the remainder of the current turn. For example, let's say the roll is a 3 and the SAM is disabled. The Growler will be revealed for the rest of the game and cannot be used again to attack on this turn. Red may now use their cruise missile to attack. Since the cruise missile is active and they have a launcher and a fob, they will select a ground target. The threshold is 1 or higher and no jamming is present, so they do not need to roll. They choose to attack the MDOC. If blue does not have a defense, then the MDOC receives 3 damage. The cruise missile cannot be used again this turn and must be turned sideways to show that it has been used. Red must pay 1 resource to reuse the cruise missile on a subsequent turn. Red could also attack with their striker against any ground target in levels 2 or 3. He or she chooses to attack the disabled SAM. Blue could intercept with their infantry because the SAM has no defensive options against ground attackers. But if they do, the striker's attack value of 2 will apply to both the infantry and the SAM because the infantry does not have enough firepower to destroy the striker. That means it can damage the interceptor and continue to attack the original target. In this case, the striker would receive 1 damage. If blue does not use an intercept, then the SAM will be discarded and the striker will receive no damage. We will now look at some unique aspects of the cyber capabilities. For the purpose of the game, employing a cyber card requires a successful die roll. For example, the rootkit card has a threshold of 3, meaning that a 3 or higher must be rolled for the card to take effect. When a die roll is required, cards may be moved to the employed area, but cannot be revealed until all requirements are met and the die roll is successful. The die roll is modified by any applicable attacking and defending cards. Cyber offensive modifiers can be used multiple times in one turn, but attack actions are only allowed once. Whenever a roll is required, the defender has the opportunity to reveal defensive cards that affect the roll's outcome. On a failed roll, if the defender had applicable defenses, the failing card must be discarded. This is to model an adversary detecting the cyber attack and then reconfiguring their systems. Any modifiers remain, given no specific instructions on the card. If a die roll is successful, the card may be marked using a black chip, showing both players that this card is active and has an ongoing effect. Unless the cyber attack or exploit has a per-turn effect, it must be re-rolled each turn to have an impact. Here's an example of how attacking and defending is conducted using cyber capabilities. Blue is once again attacking and has scanning and fingerprinting and a worm employed. The worm requires that the scanning and fingerprinting card be revealed on the table. Blue chooses to attack their opponent with a worm. At this point, red may reveal 1 or more cyber defense cards and follow the instructions listed. In this case, red chooses to defend with a firewall. All applicable cyber defense cards must be revealed at the time of the roll. It is common to have multiple cyber cards from both players factor into the success or failure of the attack. Originally, blue needed a roll of 3 or more for the worm to be successful. Scanning and fingerprinting provides a +1 bonus to the roll, but red's firewall decreases the roll by 3. All modifiers are added or subtracted to the die roll. Let's say blue rolls a 4. The bonus +1 would make this a 5, but the defense subtracts 3, making the final value a 2. This does not meet the threshold of 3 for success. In this case, red had a capability that provided a defense, so any failed roll means that the worm must be discarded. The scanning and fingerprinting card would return face up to the player's area and could be used to support another attack even on the same turn. If red did not have a firewall, but the roll still failed, then blue must wait until their next turn to try the attack again. This will require the player to roll again. If the roll would have been a 6, the bonus and defense would make the final roll a 4, leading to a successful attack. Red's firewall would stay in the employed area. The worm would take effect immediately, meaning that on each of Red's turns, they would have to randomly discard one of their cards during their supply draw. This would happen every round until the worm is removed from the game or blue no longer meets the requirement. Here are a few more miscellaneous notes. The MDOC can only be targeted by cards with attack ground in the attack options. Electronic warfare assets may not be intercepted while using an electronic attack, similar to a long-range fires attack. If a player has a card that can detect stealth on defense, then all cards can defend against stealth assets. Also, if a player has a card that can detect stealth on offense, then other cards can damage stealth assets when attacking. And most of all, remember to have fun. This wraps up our tutorial of Battlespace Next, multi-domain operations. If you have additional questions, please reference the game instructions for more detail and additional examples. If you have comments, suggestions, or ideas, please email nathaniel.flack@afit.edu. For more information, please visit the websites for the Center for Cyberspace Research and the Air Force Cyberspace Technical Center of Excellence. I hope you now have the information you need to understand this game and build a winning strategy. I hope you have fun playing Battlespace Next.